They said Elias Rowan built the finest mill the town had ever seen, a grand place of stone and timber, with tall windows that caught the morning sun and iron wheels that turned like the hands of time itself. On the day it opened, the whole town gathered in their best clothes. Merchants smiled. Children ran through the square. Even the old men, the ones who trusted no one and praised even less, stood there nodding with quiet respect. To them, Elias Rowan was proof that a man could rise, that hard work could still win, that greatness could come even from a forgotten little town at the edge of nowhere. But what they saw that day was only the ending. What they did not see, what almost no one knew, was that years earlier, this same man had once slept on the dirt floor of an abandoned barn with a bleeding hand, an empty stomach, and a name people spoke with laughter. Not admiration, laughter. Because before Elias became the richest man in town, before he was praised, copied, and envied, he was the man people pointed at when they wanted to warn their sons what failure looked like. And that is what makes this story dangerous. Because if you had seen him then, truly seen him, you would never have believed he would become anything at all. He was not born into power. He was not born into wealth. He was the son of a carpenter in a small old town where life moved slowly, dreams stayed small, and a man who reached too high was usually pulled back down by the hands of reality, or by the whispers of his neighbors. But Elias was different. Even as a young man, there was something restless in him, something sharp, something hungry. He did not want a quiet life of fixed chairs, repaired doors, and borrowed coins counted at the end of each winter. He wanted more. More than his father had. More than this town thought possible. More than anyone believed a man like him had the right to ask for. And that hunger would first make him bold, then foolish, then broken. Because the cruelest thing about great success is this: it almost always begins where no one is clapping. It begins in silence and shame, in failure nobody sees. And Elias Rowan had more of that than anyone knew. And once that hunger took hold of him, it began pulling him toward choices that looked brave from a distance, but foolish up close. When Elias was 21, he borrowed a small sum from his father and bought a wagon full of oak planks from a trader passing through town. He had heard that builders in the next county were paying double for good wood, and in his mind, the profit was already his. He pictured himself returning with silver in his pocket, standing taller, speaking louder, finally being seen as more than a carpenter's son. But Elias had studied none of it. He did not know the road through Black Hollow turned to mud after heavy rain. He did not know two larger merchants had already flooded that market the week before. And he did not know that confidence, by itself, has never saved a man from bad timing. Halfway there, one wheel cracked in the mud, the load shifted, and by the time he reached the county, the buyers had no use for what he carried. He came home with wet boots, empty hands, and the first real taste of humiliation. His father said very little. That was somehow worse. Still, Elias did not stop. A year later he tried again. This time he partnered with a cheerful, smooth-talking stable owner named Martin to open a storage yard for timber and grain. Martin had charm. Elias had energy. Together they looked convincing, at least from the outside. For a few months, things seemed promising. They rented land, built fences, even hired two boys to help unload carts. Then the cracks began. Martin was careless with money. Elias was careless with trust. Bills were ignored. Records were sloppy. A shipment went missing, then another. By the time Elias realized how much had been mishandled, the yard was already sinking. Martin vanished one morning before sunrise, leaving behind debt, excuses, and a locked office with almost nothing inside. That failure hurt more than the first, not because Elias lost more money, but because he had been fooled so easily. And yet even then, he still refused to learn slowly. At 24, he tried three things at once: hauling goods, buying tools to resell, and taking on repair contracts he could not finish on time. He ran from job to job, promise to promise, thinking movement meant progress. It did not. It only made the collapse louder. Soon the town began to talk. Not kindly, not quietly. They called him reckless, a dream chaser, a man with big plans and empty pockets. But losing money was not what wounded him most. What wounded him most was the feeling that they might be right. And still, with all that doubt beginning to creep into his chest, Elias placed his final hope in one last partnership with the one man he believed would never betray him. And that last hope was the most dangerous one of all, because this time Elias did not just risk his money, he risked his trust. The man's name was Nathan Vale. They had grown up together, worked side by side as boys, shared bread, shared plans, shared the kind of loyalty that feels unbreakable when life is still simple. If Elias was fire, Nathan was calm. If Elias dreamed too fast, Nathan seemed steady enough to balance him. At least, that was what Elias believed. Together they planned something bigger than anything Elias had tried before. Not wagon work, not storage yards, not scattered side trades, a real workshop. They would build fine furniture, carved cabinets, writing desks, polished tables, pieces rich families in the city would pay well for. Nathan handled the books and the buyers. Elias handled the craft, the labor, the vision. For the first time in years, Elias felt something he had almost forgotten. Hope. He sold what little he still owned, borrowed more money, worked from before sunrise until his hands shook at night. He cut timber, shaped legs, planed surfaces smooth as still water. Day after day, night after night, he poured himself into that workshop as if hard work alone could force life to finally say yes. And for a brief moment, it almost seemed possible. A merchant from the city placed a large order. The workers moved faster. The lamps burned later. Elias began to imagine the debt paid off, his father's respect restored, his name clean. But what he didn't realize was that the floor beneath him had already begun to crack. The merchant delayed payment, then delayed again. One shipment was returned with complaints. Another never arrived. 2 workers quit after hearing rumors that the business was drowning in debt. Elias told himself it was temporary. Just one hard season, one more push. The worst part was yet to come. One cold morning, Elias arrived at the workshop before dawn and found the office door open. The ledger was gone. The cash box was gone. Nathan was gone. No warning. Nothing. Just silence, and the kind of betrayal that makes the whole world feel suddenly unfamiliar. At first, Elias refused to believe it. He searched the stables, the inn, the road out of town. He asked questions no one could answer. By sunset, the truth was standing in front of him like a blade. Nathan had taken what money remained, copied the client list, and disappeared before the collapse could fall on him too. And once word spread, the town did what towns do best. It judged. Some said Elias had been too foolish to see what was right in front of him. Others said he deserved it. Creditors came to his door. Suppliers demanded payment. His father, already worn down by worry, fell ill from the strain, and the woman Elias had hoped to marry quietly stepped away from him, unable to tie her future to a man whose life kept turning to dust. That night, with rain falling hard and nowhere left in town that did not feel like shame, Elias walked beyond the last lantern and disappeared into the dark. And in that darkness, with rain in his eyes and ruin at his back, Elias walked farther than he ever had before, until even his pride was too tired to keep him standing. Near the edge of the old North Road, beyond the farms and the last broken fence line, he found shelter in a half-collapsed shed that leaned against the wind like an old man refusing to fall. He sank to the floor, soaked through, trembling, his injured hand pressed against his chest. And for the first time in his life, Elias stopped fighting long enough to feel what had become of him. Not angry, not determined, just empty. By morning, he woke to the sound of slow footsteps and metal clinking together. An old man stood in the doorway, carrying a wooden box of tools and staring at him with one sharp eye. The other was clouded white. His coat was worn. His face looked carved by weather. He said nothing at first. He just looked at Elias, then at the broken hand, then at the mud on his boots. "Either you're hiding from the world," the old man said at last, "or the world has finally caught up with you." His name was Mara. People in distant villages still knew him as a master clockmaker, though in this part of the world most had forgotten. Years before, fire had taken his shop, his savings, and nearly his life. Since then, he lived alone on the outskirts, repairing clocks, tools, hinges, anything that still had a chance to be made useful again. He took Elias in, not with kindness exactly, but with a hard, unsentimental mercy. For days, Elias said very little. He chopped wood, carried water, swept the floor, At night, he sat by the workbench and watched Mara repair tiny springs and delicate gears with the patience of a man who no longer rushed to prove anything. Then one evening, without looking up, Mara said the words Elias would remember for the rest of his life. "You keep calling your pain bad luck, but pain is not what ruined you. Running from it did." Elias said nothing. Mara continued, "Every time life tried to teach you slowly, you demanded to win quickly. That is why you kept falling." The words landed harder than any insult ever had, because they were true. And that was the twist Elias never expected. The man who would change his life was not rich, not powerful, not admired by the town. He was a half-forgotten old craftsman with one good eye and steady hands. A man who had lost everything and learned how to become precise instead of bitter. Under Mara's roof, Elias did not rebuild his dreams first. He rebuilt his discipline. He learned to sand one edge until it was right, to repair one gear until it turned cleanly, to finish one task before reaching for the next. No grand speeches, no big promises, just quiet work, repeated day after day, until the noise inside him began to settle. And for the first time, Elias was not chasing success. He was becoming the kind of man who could carry it. And once that change took root inside him, the world, slowly and almost reluctantly, began to change the way it answered him. Months passed, then years. Elias did not rush back into town with speeches or promises. He returned quietly, taking the jobs no proud man wanted to take. He repaired broken shutters, built plain tables, fixed warped doors. Then better work came. A cabinet for a shopkeeper, a writing desk for a schoolmaster, a carved cradle for a young couple expecting their first child. Piece by piece, board by board, his name returned to the town, not as a joke this time, but as something far more powerful. Reliable. That was the word people started using, and from that word, everything else grew. The small orders became larger ones. The larger ones became contracts. Elias hired one worker, then 3, then 10. Years later, he opened the mill that would change the town itself, bringing jobs, trade, and life back into streets that had once gone quiet by dusk. The same people who had once whispered about his failures now pointed to his success as if they had believed in him all along. But life, as it often does, saved one final test for the end. One winter afternoon, a thin man in a worn coat stepped into Elias' office. Nathan, older now, hollow-eyed, broken down by years that had clearly shown him no mercy. For a long moment, neither man spoke. The past stood between them like a third person in the room. Nathan finally lowered his head and asked for work. Work, any chance at all. Now that was the moment everyone would have understood revenge. A slammed door, a cold smile, a debt repaid in humiliation. But Elias had lived too much life by then to confuse bitterness with strength. He looked at Nathan and said quietly, "You did not destroy my future. You exposed what was weak in me. I trusted without wisdom. I built without patience. And I wanted success before I was ready to carry it." Nathan said nothing. He could not. Elias gave him a small job, nothing more. No restored friendship, no easy trust, just one chance to work and earn, like any other man. Because by then, Elias had learned something most people never do. Great success is rarely built in the bright moments people admire. It is built in the silent ones, the humiliating ones, the nights when no one claps, no one believes, and no one sees the battle except you. So if this story meant something to you, if it gave you a perspective or a lesson you needed, so you can finally do something with your own life, then please like this video and share it with someone who needs it. And here's a simple question for you. What do you think shapes a person more? Success or failure? Leave your answer in the comments so others can read your perspective too. I will be back with another story to help you keep growing. Thank you for listening, and I will see you in the next one.